question today: how far will Donald Trump go to keep his finances hidden? The answer may lie in a new lawsuit Donald Trump and his kids, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric Trump, just filed against the banks that have been subpoenaed by Congress. That's Deutsche Bank and Capital One. The lawsuit is designed to block those banks from responding in any way to the congressional committees seeking information about Trump's finances. The New York Times reporting, quote, in the suit filed in federal court in Manhattan, the president and his family members argue that the Democratic House committee leaders who issued the subpoenas engaged in a broad overreach. Representative Maxine Waters, the chair of the Financial Services Committee, and Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intel Committee, issued a joint statement accusing the president of obstructing lawmakers' constitutional oversight authority, and added, quote, as a private businessman, Trump routinely used his well-known litigiousness and the threat of lawsuits to intimidate others, but he will find that Congress will not be deterred. Our friend Tim O'Brien from Bloomberg adds this, quote, welcome to the first salvos of the post-Mueller battle between the White House and Congress over the separation of powers, executive authority, and the Pandora's box of thorny, troubling problems stemming from the fact that Trump is the most financially conflicted president of the modern era. This latest standoff, combined with the obstruction case laid out in the Mueller report, leading the Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden to say today that Trump's impeachment may become the only choice for Democrats who are constitutionally bound to provide oversight.
There are elements of the report in the second phase of the report, about 7 or 8 things that are left undone. He was not within his purview to investigate, he thought. The Congress is attempting to take that up. And what the Congress should do, and they are doing, is investigate that. And if, in fact, they block the investigation, they have no alternative to go to the only other constitutional resort they have is impeachment.
And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Ashley Parker, White House reporter for The Washington Post. The former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi. And with us on set, former federal prosecutor for the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York, Barrett Berger. Karine Jean-Pierre's back, senior advisor to MoveOn.org. And executive editor for Bloomberg Opinion, who we've already quoted, and he hasn't even opened his mouth. Tim O'Brien is here. Let me start with you, Tim, because you've been following the money when it comes to Trump for a really long time. Where does it lead?
Well, it leads obviously into his wallet, but the larger issue it leads to is whether or not the President of the United States isn't just financially conflicted, but he's financially compromised. And this was something that obviously Mueller focused in part on, but I don't think he focused on it in depth. And I think he ultimately made a strategic decision to let other prosecutors or investigators or Congress take a deeper look at that. But it came up in the Mueller report, obviously, around the discussion of the Trump Tower Moscow project. And the reason that was an issue was because President Trump, one, lied about its existence. He lied about his depth of his involvement with it. And I think the reason he did was because it raises this issue of whether or not during the election and his campaign and the transition, he had money at stake in Moscow that shaded any of the public policy decisions he was contemplating or possibly considered enacting, which became even a more fulsome issue once he entered office. But it's not just Trump Tower Moscow. Trump has decades of dealings with organized crime, and with very murky sources of funding that raise questions about whether anyone has a tether on him. And that hasn't fully been answered. And Mueller chose not to dig into that. But we now have several committees in Congress looking at this issue. We have the New York State Attorney General looking at it. And you have the Southern District of New York. And I think what unites this shouldn't be a partisan or ideological issue. It's about good government. It's about transparency, ethical leadership, and good public policy making that's not corrupted by greed or self-interest.
You've been sued by Trump. I imagine you're not surprised that he took this route as a sitting president of roping his kids in, surprise, surprise, and suing the bank so they can't comply. But what do you make of the tactic?
Also, ironically, one of the plaintiffs in this case is his trust that he set up to ostensibly insulate him from conflicts of interest while he was in the White House. That entity is also suing to prevent disclosures. Trump has been doing this since at least 1973. Roy Cohn taught him how to weaponize the legal system. And in that year, the Justice Department went after the Trump family for racial discrimination in their housing developments in the outer boroughs of New York. And typically, most of those developers, when the federal government came after them, they paid their fine and they shut up and they moved on. Trump and Cohn sued the Justice Department. They countersued, saying it was a bogus suit. And despite ample evidence that they were discriminating against applicants, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that a light bulb went on in his head in that year. In 1973, Donald Trump is 27 years old, and he realizes that if you don't really care about the environment in which you say things, civility, or the law, you can wage war whenever you feel like it.
A light bulb went off. It's not clear that it's still lit. Frank Figliuzzi, I don't know anything about law enforcement, but I have a 7-year-old, and when he says, "Don't look here, don't look here. I'm going to do everything, Mama, but don't look here," the first thing I do when he leaves the room is I go look and where he told me not to look, and he's always busted. So Donald Trump taking this step as a sitting president, don't look here, don't look here, don't look here at Deutsche Bank and Capital One. Deutsche Bank, obviously, a lot of questions about the role they've played in financing his golf courses and all of his businesses. And Capital One, I believe that's the checking account on which he wrote the hush money payments, where he is now implicated as an unindicted co-conspirator in an illegal hush money scheme in SDNY. It would seem incredibly important to any investigation by law enforcement or by Congress to have access to those bank records, no?
Yeah, someone who's got nothing to hide doesn't want to sit in the dark, and the president's trying to stay in the dark and keep us in the dark. And what I'm seeing, Nicole, is a link between corruption and compromise. I think he's compromised by his own corruption. He doesn't want this to get out. And by the way, I see a link to the counterintelligence investigation that started this whole thing, because if you're talking about compromise and finances, a portion of that may likely have been reserved for the counterintelligence investigators at the FBI, because it's clearly not addressed in the Mueller case. And more evidence that there's a counterintelligence compromise angle here, Nicole, is that it's been reported today that Adam Schiff and the House Intelligence Committee have hired the former chief of the Financial Crime Section for the FBI. That's a major acquisition and tells me that it's the intelligence folks on the Hill that are looking at the finances, and we need to watch that closely.
You know what, Frank, let me stay with you, and let's dig in on this a little bit, because we have had a lot of conversations about the circumstances and the conduct that Donald Trump engaged in that led then acting FBI Director Andy McCabe to open a full field investigation, counterintelligence investigation into the president. And you and Tim are both right. That was not the investigative thread that we know of that Mueller pursued, but it was behavior like the lifting of sanctions that Mike Flynn pleaded guilty to lying about those conversations. Mueller reports out we still don't know why that happened. The back channel that's in the first section of the Mueller report that Jared Kushner wanted to set up with the Russians in the transition, we still don't have the answer as to why that channel needed to be opened. And Donald Trump's bizarre conduct, his flattery of Vladimir Putin, his practice of ripping up notes from the 5 one-on-one meetings with Vladimir Putin, his insistence on meeting alone with just a Russian interpreter, not even an American interpreter, when he met with Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of NATO. Those are still known unknowns in terms of Donald Trump's contacts with the Russians. Do you think those are active lines of investigation in whatever remains in that counterintelligence probe and in what Congressman Schiff wants to do with the Intel Committee?
I do indeed. All the smoke is there, but we can't find the source of the fire. And I think the source of the fire is being investigated still by Counterintelligence Division agents. And with the hire today, announced today, former Financial Crime Section Chief, going to Schiff and his team, I have to begin to wonder whether indeed there's been some sharing of information from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division with their overseers on Schiff's House and Senate Intelligence Committees, and whether that's helping shape the direction that those committees are going to go in. That's likely to have happened. That's the norm for the Counterintelligence Division to brief the Hill on significant developments in CI cases, and I think that a partnership may be developing there.
Barrett, what would the skill, Frank has now mentioned twice this hire, and it does seem significant, but just help us understand, as a former prosecutor, what that person's skill set is and what that adds to a committee like Congressman Schiff's.
Yeah, I mean, what you're looking for on a committee is somebody that actually has worked on the field, whether it's having prosecutors there to help you understand, or former prosecutors there to help you understand legal theories, whether it's having people that have worked in the FBI that actually understand what the nature of the threat is, who the actors are that are trying to threaten us, and where our vulnerabilities are. So I think that's really the skill set that somebody like that would bring to the committee.
So, Ashley, I saw you on the 11, and I'm trying to understand what's in Trump's head, whether he's doing this kabuki dance with impeachment. Does he want to bait them into impeaching him because some of his pals said, hey, Clinton had a 67% approval when he was impeached. Go for it, Mr. President. Or whether it really is this red line that he described in press interviews around his finances. What's your sense this morning about Trump's state of mind and these tactics, these extraordinary legal measures to keep his finances, to keep his bank records secret?
Well, the answer is actually both. In sort of the Venn diagram, it overlaps and works out for the president. He has long said and believed that impeachment is a political winner for him. It's certainly a headache, but he also believes it's a winner. It sort of forces the Democrats into a box. Already you're seeing Leader Pelosi is having some trouble managing her caucus. You have people who think that they absolutely should be moving on impeachment and people who think that they shouldn't and they should be focusing on legislating. And the president thinks, again, politically heading into 2020, if he can paint the Democrats as overzealous, that will be a huge win for him. At the same time, he actually truly doesn't want these committees to look into his finances and look into his businesses. He said that was a red line. He means it. There's a few things that he really cares about. One is his finances and his businesses. The other is his family and his children. And so here he's trying to prevent, he's not going to war with the Democrats simply because he thinks it's a political winner. He's going to war because he does not want these documents and these forms turned over. And the added benefit is he feels emboldened after the Mueller report, and he thinks he can also sort of stick it to the Dems in the process.
Corinne, let me put up some of the past headlines about his finances. Hush money payments to women, the extraordinary reporting about what he was doing on all the days that he wrote those checks to cover up an alleged sexual relationship with a porn star. Business dealings with Russia over Trump Tower, which Tim started talking about. His history of lying about the size of his worth, and suspicious tax schemes, as reported in a now Pulitzer Prize winning account in the New York Times.
Yeah, you know, we were just talking about impeachment for a second. I do believe that Donald Trump is playing a game of chicken with Democrats when it comes to impeachment. I think he really is, because regardless if Democrats impeach him or not, he's going to run on impeachment. He's been doing that for a year, and I do believe that Democrats should call his bluff. Yeah. They should have Donald Trump play on their turf, not play on his turf.
So what's that look like?
And I think it's starting impeachment proceedings. I really starting to make sure that they hold him accountable, because what they're doing now, it's on his turf, and he's just saying no to everything, and so we're not getting anywhere. It's almost like as if they're chasing each other around. And so I do believe that they need. He's you know what he's doing as well. He's testing like the guardrails of democracy, which he does all the time, and this is the space that he's operating in, and they have to just step on that and say no more.
Well, so let me make that turn with you. These are the Democrats who, the 2020 candidates, Joe Biden, the frontrunner, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, have all called for the commencement of impeachment proceedings. I believe Mayor Pete Buttigieg has said that he deserves to be impeached, but he's not in Congress, hasn't weighed in. Do you think that's? I mean, those are some of the forces within this Democratic primary. Do you think the rest will follow suit?
I think they're going to have to. I mean, what we're seeing with Donald Trump almost every day, right? right? Every day we're hearing what he's stopping, what he's not going to do, the subpoenas he's not going to pay attention to, the people he's not going to allow to speak to Congress. It's almost as if he's forcing the hand of Nancy Pelosi. And so if that's going to happen, I think Democrats in particular in the House are going to be in a place where they're going to have to do it. And that's why I think it's like this weird game of chicken. He's almost daring them to do it. And so don't play on his turf. Just don't do it.
I totally agree with Ashley's analysis that, like, it's like a right brain, left brain thing. Like, the left brain wants it because in the abstract, it's like, yeah, man, impeach me. But then the right brain's like, wait, what does that mean again? Like, you know, let me get the what does that look like? I mean, how would he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who is constitutionally suited for the intensity of an impeachment.
He is not constitutionally.
I don't mean like the Constitution.
No,
I mean
but
like
he's not as a human being. As a human being, you know, he is not capable of withstanding scrutiny around anything or being patient with process.
Right.
Period. None of this is about strategy. It's a mud fight with Congress over what he believes his prerogative should be. But I'm firmly with Frank on this, that the big motivating factor here is he wants to remain in the dark. And I think that that's why we have to think about this process as something other than a typical Washington mud wrestling event. There are principles at stake here about the Congress's prerogatives in terms of oversight of the executive branch and what we think the executive branch should be constituted of. And Trump is trampling over core values. And it's not just about Republicans versus Democrats. It's about clean government, and it's about corruption. And he's corrupting everyone around him that plays this game with him.
I agree with you, but he's moved, and we're going to get to this later in the show, but Frank, he's moved Rod Rosenstein, who was the target of all of that ire and all of that
and look what happened to Rod Rosenstein.
Who left with the love letter. I mean, Frank, do you, as a former FBI official, do you think that someone like Congressman Schiff, that the Democrats who see the world and see these principles as worthwhile of protecting, do you think they can move public opinion along in their way?
I think sunshine's the best disinfectant, to use a cliche, and I think that if we begin hearings and if we air out the key witnesses and we can get them to the table without going to the Supreme Court each and every time, I think the American people will begin to see, and it will resonate with many, that this is a corrupt president. Ironically, impeachment may then be the way not only to target a corrupt president, but, as has been said, to actually ensure that we're not redefining the presidency. That's what's happening here, like it or not, or understand it or not. The president's trying to redefine what being president means and trying to have three branches of government where one is more powerful than the other. And if the only way to safeguard that and preserve our equal branches of government and the way our system of checks and balances works is impeachment, then that's even more reason to go forward with it.
Ashley, I want to spend some time with you on just this idea that impeachment is this jump ball. I mean, Robert Mueller released a report where he explicitly says he cannot say the president didn't commit crimes. And everyone's like, I don't know, that's close, it's so close. Now you've got the banks. And Michael Cohen, no angel, testified in an open session that he faked the books, cooked the books with Deutsche Bank to help the president buy a football team that didn't want him. I mean, the evidence, and it's almost how he got off in the Mueller investigation. Well, everything I did wrong, I did it on Twitter. You can't catch me for that. I mean, what is the strategy moving forward? He is continuing to obstruct investigations into himself with these tactics of congressional attempts at oversight.
And that's what the Democrats, frankly, have to grapple with, even though a lot of them say that's not where public sentiment is necessarily, and it's politically unpopular. As frustrated as they were with what happened with the Mueller investigation, you have an increasing number, including committee chairs, sort of saying he's continuing to obstruct. He's continuing to abuse his power. And even if we don't have the public on our side, and even if we don't have, any Republicans in the Senate joining us, we have a constitutional duty to move forward. So you had the Mueller report, which Democrats Democrats sort of viewed as using as, regardless of what conclusion he came to, and Attorney General Barr came to, you had Democrats who sort of wanted to use that as a roadmap, as a template to, even if they didn't move forward on impeachment, call witnesses before the committee, say, hey, we know from the Mueller report that you took copious detailed notes. We want to see those memos. We want to see those notes, to subpoena documents. And now the president is preventing them from doing that. So that's actually a real tangible challenge of where they go from here. And then from the president's point of view, of course, as I said before, he doesn't actually want them looking into all of this stuff, but he also believes to a certain extent that a bit of this is a public relations war. And because the Mueller report, it was 448 pages, but a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it was litigated in the press before because there was great reporting in a number of publications. And so they sort of feel like it's not as big a deal as it would have been were it all brand new information. And there's a bit of fatigue on the part of the public, which again is why they feel emboldened in trying to kind of stymie the Democrats at every turn.
All right, really quick last question, Ashley. When is the president most detrimental to himself? When he feels like something has emboldened him and exonerated him, as you're suggesting he feels about the Mueller report, or when he feels like he's been caught doing something extra naughty even for him?
That's a great question. I either don't know the answer. I think it's a bit of both. I mean, you saw the Mueller investigation is a classic example. He sort of felt under attack just to have Russian interference looked at. And
because
therefore,
why would we want to do that, right? Like, why would we want to know what our adversary did?
And then, therefore, he felt under attack, and so he began behaving in ways that then added this whole extra bucket of obstruction of justice to the investigation. So that's him behaving sort of poorly when he feels vulnerable and under attack. But now that he feels emboldened, he's sort of exhibiting the exact same behavior, but for a different set of reasons. So I think the answer is both.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.